Welcome to People with Purpose. I am your host, Sylvain Rochon. I'm a speaker, an author, a serial entrepreneur, and a business strategist. My purpose is to engineer a paradise on Earth using cutting-edge technology. I hope this show will give you excellent examples of individuals that chose to do great things in their personal and professional lives. Perhaps they will inspire you to follow in their footsteps. The show's format is very simple. I ask my guests 3 simple questions. What is your personal purpose? Why is it important to you? And how did you get started? Now let's hear from our guest.
Hello, good evening, everybody on the channel. I have a treat with you. This is a person that I've discovered through TED Talks. So just going through YouTube and discovering different individuals and videos and interesting things. And mainly I focus on, people that talk about improving, life on the planet for us humans and animals and plants and technology, all these good things. And so I discovered Simon Anholt here, who is the co-founder of the Good Country. And I am putting down there the actual TED Talk as well as the Good Country website, because I think what the work he's doing is amazing. I want you guys to check it out. But now this is the show about people with purpose. So what we want to know is, what is the life purpose of Mr. Anholt? Simon?
Well, it's a question I've never really asked myself before. How strange is that? I suppose all of us just, we must have an idea of what our life's purpose is, but we probably never make it explicit to ourselves. We follow our noses. And if we're lucky, that aligns with some kind of fundamental purpose. It's probably a very good exercise to do this. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Having now had the chance to think about this question for 5 seconds, I think my life's purpose is probably to find as many people as I possibly can who share the same worldview as I do and get together with them.
For what purpose? Because most people don't know what the Good Country is. So maybe you can elaborate how your current project, because you've done this before, you've done other things before, aligns with your current motivational state.
Okay. Well, let me tell you as quickly as I can the story of how I started doing the Good Country. Basically, I've been working as a policy advisor to governments for a good many years, 25 years or so. And I've been traveling around the world advising governments of 50 or more countries on how they could engage more effectively with the international community, how they could get more trade, more tourism, better diplomatic relations, and all of those kinds of things. And I began to realize that they were all facing the same challenges. They all spoke to me about the same things, because I always asked them, where does it hurt? And they always replied in the same way. They said, oh, it's climate change, it's migration, it's terrorism, it's unemployment, it's pandemics, it's this, that, and the other. And so I started getting into the habit of asking the experts that I met in each individual country, well, do we know the answer to this particular problem? And 9 times out of 10, they would say, yes, we do know the answer to the problem. So I would say to them, well, if we know the answer, how come we haven't fixed these things yet? And they would always reply in the same way. They'd say, well, not enough resources. To which I would reply, well, that's extraordinary. Surely if it's something as important as climate change or terrorism, these threatening challenges, surely we could find the resources to fix them if we wanted to.
Sure.
And they say, yeah, but these are big globalized problems, and it's beyond our capability as an individual country to fix it on our own. What we need to do is to get everybody in the world working together, and they just don't. So I began to realize that actually, if you want to devote your life towards making the world a better place, you can do what most people do, which is to pick a particular challenge. And so I'm going to devote my life to the cause of climate change or human rights or whatever it is. Or else you can try and go a tiny bit deeper. And that's what I did. And I thought, okay, so what's the underlying problem that prevents us from fixing all of these problems? And the underlying problem is actually very simple. It's the countries, who are still the holders of power in the world, just don't collaborate and cooperate enough. It's not their default mode. Their default mode is competition. Their default mode is screwing each other over so that they can produce a better deal for their own citizens, which is plainly suicidal. And they collaborate and cooperate occasionally when they've got no other choice. And so it began to occur to me after years and years of doing this work that actually if we could change the culture of governance worldwide from fundamentally competitive to fundamentally collaborative, then we wouldn't be facing so many challenges. Gradually, we'd be able to fight them. And so around about 2012, I thought, let me try and see if I can do some measurement here and work out which countries do the most for the world, which ones are actually collaborating and cooperating more, and which ones are more selfish. And so I came up with the idea of the Good Country Index, which makes it sound a lot simpler than it is. It's actually very complicated. But what I basically did with my colleague Robert Govers was we got together all of the good data we could find, which is mostly from the UN system, which measures the external impacts of countries, everything they do outside their own borders that has a positive or negative impact on the rest of humanity and the rest of the planet. We stick it all in a gigantic table. We put it through a simple algorithm, and we end up with a ranking. The country at the top is the one that does the most for the planet outside its own borders, and the one on the bottom is the one that does least. I launched this index, the first edition, at a TED event in 2014, and the most astonishing thing happened. I started getting thousands upon thousands upon thousands of emails from people. The talk did pretty well. It's just past 5.1 million views, which was much more than I was expecting. And it's great, and it still gets 10,000 views every day, 4 years later. But the most amazing thing was the emails. It was people writing to me from all over the world saying, Sylvain, the most touching things. They were saying things like, all my adult life, I've been hoping that somebody like-minded, who sees the world the same way as I do, would stand up and say the things that you've just said. What do you want me to do? And so I became quite curious about this because I'm a data geek.
Yeah.
These 16,000 emails I've received over the last 4 years, is that everybody in the world who sees the world this way? Or is it the tip of a much bigger iceberg? So I got back together with my friend Robert, and he's a statistician, I'm not. And we used the World Values Survey, which is a wonderful project. It administers a huge questionnaire to huge numbers of people all over the world every year to find out their values and the things they believe in, the things they don't. But we tried to figure out how many people in the world actually share this value set, that they would like to see more cooperation and collaboration between countries, that they think that they're a citizen of the world first and a citizen of their own nation second, that they don't suffer from diseases like racism or intolerance, that they don't mistrust or fear somebody just because they happen to come from a different cultural background, that maybe they'd pay a tiny little bit more taxes if they thought it would genuinely help somebody in a distant country. You get the idea. Those values. It turns out that there is an absolute hardcore of about 10% of the world's population that firmly believes in those values. They always have done, since the day they were born. 10% of the world's population. Okay, so last time I checked, that comes up to about 760 million people. So I thought about this. I'm nearly finished. And I thought to myself, 760 million people, that's the third most populous nation on the planet. That's double the population of the United States of America. They're all citizens of the same nation, they just don't realize it yet. They share the same values. They want the world to be a better place for very similar reasons. And so out of that was born the idea of the Good Country. So my co-founder, Madeline Hung, and I, we sat down and we said, what we need to do is we need to activate this country. We need to speak to all of those 760 million people and say, welcome home. This is your country. You can keep your existing country, your territory-based country. This is a digital nation that you can be a citizen of, and together with our collective power, our collective economic power, because they're going to be paying $5 a year each taxes, which gives us the same spending power as the annual GDP of Sierra Leone, but without Sierra Leone's problems to have to fix, right? So we can become a very serious actor on the international stage and start fixing the world's problems, and you can be a citizen of that nation and finally make that connection between little old me and great big world. Voilà, that's what we're trying to do.
And that's an amazing thought process. And just to give you a little bit of an idea, I'm a biochemist. That's one of my degrees from that I've taught, but I have never used as research. Honestly, I'm a geek myself, but I never really enjoyed lab work. So, and there's very good research, and I would have to pull it out. I don't remember who did this. It shows if in developed countries, so where stress levels are reasonably low, people take greater pleasure giving to others than giving to themselves. This is just a biological truth. It lines up with much of what you're saying as that you saw in statistics. People,
but only in developed countries.
Sorry?
But only in developed countries.
Yeah, when stress levels are higher, then you have the sympathetic neural system that kicks in, and then it's survival. And then survival biochemistry is very selfish. So there's a tendency to help and support immediate members of family, for example, when people are right in close vicinity, and others are left to fend for themselves. So, and I don't want to take the stage in your recording here, Simon, but this does say a lot as towards efforts like yourselves, where there's a significant amount of the population that are in serious survival situations. And those individuals, of course, don't really think a whole lot about what's happening in other countries because they have to eat, right, and immediate needs. So the part of the solution of other groups, including myself in my own initiatives with technology, AI, and advocacy, is to use technology to make sure everybody has basic needs. And then there is a lot more we can do, for collaboration between individuals, countries, nations, and so on and so forth.
But here's the thing. The vast majority of the people who wrote to me after my TED talk did not come from developed countries. The vast majority of them came from developing countries and continue to do so.
How interesting, huh?
When you look at the stats, you see, if all I was doing here was creating another kind of liberal NGO of well-meaning, guilty-feeling North Americans and Western Europeans, I wouldn't be bothered. Because that's so obvious. And it's so helpless, and lots of people do it all the time. What's so interesting about the response that I've been getting over the last 4 years is the very strong implication that this is actually a character trait, that this is not purely the result of your environment, nor is it purely the result of your education, nor is it purely the result of your level of prosperity. In fact, the data shows that there's only a very weak correlation between education, prosperity, and these kind of cosmopolitan tendencies. There's a big element there, like the dark matter in this personality set, which can't be accounted for in any way, in any demographic way. It appears to be just a character trait. So
it's to be inherent to the individuals.
So I think it's just the way you are.
How fascinating is that?
Some poor people help other poor people.
Oh yes, definitely, absolutely. Yeah. Just to follow up on these questions about you and the good country. I mean, you're a data geek, as you say. So you've followed the trail of data to certain conclusions. You've done talks. You've started educating. You've found an opportunity to perhaps elevate the planet through organizing a nation, like a digital nation now, that we can organize now that we have a very strong internet and infrastructure for it. But I guess my question is this only a project for you, or are you somehow encoded in your soul in some way, if you believe in such things, to actually be a magnet for these individuals and to do this type of work on the planet at this time? I mean, does it align with who you are yourself?
Oh, yes. I mean, only once or twice in my life have I ever tried to do things that don't align with who I am, and it's always been disastrous. Okay, it's very easy to post-rationalize, isn't it? When you find yourself doing something, it's very easy and very tempting to wind the movie back from that point and see how everything you did up until that point led to this point. It's a very easy trick to play, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's false. And I'm absolutely certain that the Good Country Project is something that was gestating in my mind from the age of about 16. No question at all. Now, I'm not saying that it was in any sense predestined, but just that it's my interests and my tastes which have led me in this direction. I haven't found myself accidentally in this place. I've walked here.
You've taken some decisions. I mean,
for reasons that have a lot to do with who I am and what I'm interested in. I think that's an important thing to say. The other thing is that I am extremely ancient. I'm 57 or 58 years old.
You call that extremely ancient?
Yeah, that's extremely
wow.
ancient. I'm entitled to call myself wise at this age. And I know for sure that this is going to keep me fully occupied for as long as I have energy to use. So in that sense, if it doesn't sound too pompous, I do think of this as the culmination of my career. At a time when a great many of my friends are starting to think about retirement, I'm doing the biggest thing I've ever tried to do in the whole of my life, but this is the right moment. I couldn't have done it any sooner.
Yes, absolutely. Right. And you mentioned that backtracking in time, you think maybe the kernel of all this started when you were about 16 years old. Do you think there are some factors around you at that time or even earlier that help you frame this in your mind and in this little germinal phase?
Sure. I mean, the fact that I also belong to that personality set of people who are attracted by difference. I ever since I was very tiny, I always thought, I was born in the UK, in England, and I always thought that other countries were bound to be more interesting than the country I was born in. And I always thought that other people's languages sounded nicer than my language. And I always thought that foreigners were just more interesting than the people who were like me. And I assumed this was the same for everybody, but over the years I've come to realize that actually it's something of a minority that sees things that way. And why did I end up like that? I don't know. Perhaps because I grew up in a household where several languages were spoken, because I'm a bit of a mongrel myself. There are several races and nationalities in there. That was perhaps why I took to languages, and I love to learn languages, and then for that reason I chose to do languages at university, and so on and so on and so on. So you can see how these things work.
Yeah, so it seems, I mean, of course, as a researcher, you can't take one data set, an analysis, and generalize it and a blanket apply it. But your research and your own life experiences, and as well as my own, because I was the black sheep of the family, well respected and loving family, but nobody in my family really understood what's going on in my head and why I was doing certain things and why I was attracted to doing things a certain way. And so it seems like from your data that there are some individuals that are just kind of, for whatever reason, attracted to this line of thinking, to this unifying, let's all like work together and and make the world a better place kind of thinking.
Love of humanity, if you like.
Well, yeah, and it's extremely interesting that there is, and I would have to do further research and you may have, if there's other research papers that have come out that have come to a similar conclusion. We'd have to take a look at that, but that's very interesting. In
the field of cosmopolitanism, there's been an enormous amount of research in this. And yeah, generally speaking, I mean, the estimates of the size of this particular population vary enormously. The BBC did a study last year with a company called GlobeScan, and I think they only asked one question, so it wasn't especially statistically robust. But basically, they asked people whether they felt they were world citizens, and the report last year was that for the first time since they'd started doing this study, it was more than half the world's population. So more than 50% of human beings now identify as a global citizen first. But that's just one question, and it's a kind of nice question to answer yes to, so I don't know how deeply one should believe them. But
everybody wants to be part of the gang, even though fundamentally they may not really believe that.
How big the gang you want to belong to is, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, 7.6 billion people is an awfully large gang, and it doesn't give you quite the same sense of belonging unless you have a very vivid imagination as belonging to, 5 kids roaming around the back streets of Toronto beating people up.
True.
Or whatever.
I don't know why you mentioned America with the That's fine. I'm in Canada. I'm okay. Everything's fine here. No, that's not. It also has its troubles. But let's jump to a final question here, Simon. I guess maybe more of a request. There are some people, most of the people that watch this show or follow me are like-minded individuals. Some of them are somewhat young, or they feel like they want to do something, but they don't know quite how to get something done. So what would be your suggestion or recommendation to those that want to do something but don't know how, that are watching this?
Well, I think the first thing I'd say to them is, well done you for asking that question, because by no means everybody does. Although with every new generation, it seems to be a larger and larger proportion, which is one of the reasons why I'm extremely optimistic about the future of humanity. I think we're just getting better and better and better. Of course, there are some negative trends there, but there would be. The second thing I'd say is make sure you become a citizen of the good country come September. Because that really is an effort to try to, as I said before, make that connection between little old me and great big world. And there are not very many of those connections that you can make. So it really depends on where your tastes are. If you're very, very motivated by very local issues, it's a great deal easier because you can make a very big difference locally. So if the thing that really exercises you is litter in your hometown or in your own district or your own village, then in a sense you're very lucky because you really can make a difference there just by going out every day and picking up litter and waiting till people copy you. And that's great. If, on the other hand, you are a bit more like you and me, and you're kind of interested and you just can't stop thinking about the whole of humanity and the whole planet and the whole country, then that connection between what you do and making things better is a little bit harder to make. And you need complex vehicles to make that connection. That's why the Good Country exists. I would urge people to copy it, rip it off, do their own version, join it as well, if possible. There are a million different ways that can be done. And over the next couple of generations, what I'm really hoping is that we'll see more and more people seriously working at ways of making that connection between the individual's desire for a better world and actually changing the world, because that's the trick. And out there today, there are so many NGOs and charities and other non-profit organizations all promising to change the world on your behalf. But so far, I'm not very impressed by them. They talk a great talk, and I'm sure they're very well intentioned. The charities on the whole do a really good job of raising money, and in some cases money is what's required, and it does a lot of good, especially in emergency disaster relief. But a lot of these organizations, particularly the activist organizations, the campaigning organizations, they make wild promises about changing the world, but actually all they ever do is raise awareness and raise awareness and raise awareness. And if there are terrible problems out there and all you do is raise awareness of them, you increase people's sense of impotence without actually providing the remedy. And I think we need to get beyond that stage in the next couple of generations. People need to sit down seriously and say, actually, is it really enough just to invite people to a concert, get them to give me $20, get them to visit a website, sign a petition? Is that really changing the world? No, it's not. Is it really making things better? Actually, probably not. It's just creating a sense of disempowerment. So what are we actually going to do to actually make things better? Those are the questions that need to be asked.
Well, that's a great recommendation. I think everybody should listen to you, follow you, and other projects that are similarly minded, because there are others. Together we are just much more powerful, and that's how policy is changed. It's not by a single person sending a letter or an email. Usually, if we're talking about governments, it's generally a certain group or a lobby group, right, that says, hey, this is what we want, and we are a certain largish proportion of the population, and we're demanding a certain amount of changes.
Yes, but my own personal view here is that really good sustainable change doesn't come about by harassing people in power.
Yeah, true.
Again, this is another of my complaints about the activist tendency, that again, it sometimes seems as if the only tool they've got in their toolbox is trying to make leaders feel bad about doing what they regard as the wrong thing. And that's very bad psychology. If you're in a position of power and responsibility, you've got a hell of a difficult job on your hands. And if you get a petition on your desk with 100 million people saying you should be ashamed of yourself, I just don't think that's good psychology. What we should be doing is we should be figuring out how to help these people do their jobs better. And if anybody ever thinks that politicians are an evil lot and all should be thrown into jail, well, you should try being a politician for a while. I have nothing but respect for the majority of politicians. I've worked with them all of my life, and almost without exception, the reason that they're doing that job is because they have a highly elevated civic sense. They really, most of them are not there because they're greedy and corrupt and power crazy. That's a tiny minority. They don't come that way, but they join that career path at the beginning because they have a sense of social responsibility. We need to help them do a better job.
So it's really the approach, like the tools are there. I mean, they're fairly established, but the approaching the leadership with a positive solution instead of a problem. Yeah. And there are solutions. Hell, it's full of it. Well, thanks a lot for your time, Simon. That was great. I'm happy you were here, and I am really happy you created the Good Country. Amazing initiative.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed the interview. If you did, please subscribe to the channel, comment, like, and share. Please join me also on Clubify, a social app allowing us to share ideas and where you can participate in some of my projects. The link is in the section below. Also, if you wish to recommend someone great I should interview, please let me know. And as always, follow your passion. See you next week.